And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman, and joining me today to do the show, a friend of mine now, and his name is Ash, and he's from the upcoming podcast called FFC and Me. He just interviewed me, so I thought, you know what? Come on, Cottage Talk. We're going to talk about Fulham. We're going to learn a little bit about Ash in this new podcast. I certainly would recommend everyone listening to his podcast when it does go live. And on top of it, we're going to talk about, we have two really interesting topics to talk about. And as we look forward to the upcoming match for Fulham against Brentford, we're going to talk about how does Fulham overcome the loss of Palhinha. Interesting. And we're also going to be sharing our thoughts on the upcoming situation with Manor Solomon. So we have a lot to talk about in this quick, probably about half-hour show. Before we do anything else, I just always want to mention, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcast. It does help Fulham supporters find us. Okay. Ash, I really appreciate you coming on Cottage Talk, interviewing me. That was very nice of you to interview me. Thank you so much for joining me on Cottage Talk today.
It's my pleasure, Russ. To say, as we just spoke about, I've listened to the podcast for a long time, so I'm very pleased to come on and put my 2 pence in about a few situations. So that's fine by me.
Okay, well, we're going to do that. But before we do that, I want everyone to learn about this new podcast that you're doing. It's actually a great idea, Ash. You're going to be interviewing Fulham supporters. You've interviewed a few. And just tell everyone about the podcast and when it does go live, where they can access it.
Yeah, so the podcast itself is slightly different to, I think it's slightly different to a normal sort of Fulham podcast. We have some absolutely brilliant podcasts for most Fulham fans to listen to. But this show is going to be, it's not about the sort of weekly ins and outs of the club. It's about Fulham fans. I'm looking to speak to sort of fans from all over the world, the UK as well as further afield, especially those that sort of run supporters groups, podcasts like yourself, who go out of their way, especially to sort of try and follow the club. The main reason for it is because as a London-based Fulham fan, I love to know how people stay committed to supporting a club like ours. I love to find out why people fall in love with a club like ours. And I also want to sort of learn about what makes us as a fan base tick, what makes us as a fan base feel like, as we all like to say, like a Fulham family. So that's one of the reasons why. The other reason why is is a little bit more nerdy on my part. Is that it's sort of an anthropological look at us as a football club. So it's an awful good way to sort of get to know other fans, and I'm very hopeful that I've had some sort of decent responses to my outcries for people to get involved, and I'm hoping to get some more people involved. So if anybody out there who sort of does want to take part, sort of wants to tell your story of sort of how you became a Fulham fan, as well as giving your opinions on sort of more quirky things like your favorite kits and stuff like that, to sort of follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at FFC and Me, and just send us a private message and say that you want to get involved. Say I just lucky enough to just interview you just now. It is quite fun. It's not meant to be anything serious. There's no right or wrong opinions in it. It's all just about getting to know you as a Fulham fan, and then obviously anyone who watches it will also get to know you as a Fulham fan. At the moment, the show is due to go live this Wednesday, with my first show. It'll be on YouTube. We are hoping that eventually it will become a podcast that will get released on sort of the normal podcast routines. But at the moment, it's just sticking with as a YouTube channel. So if you go onto YouTube and you search for FFC and Me, you'll see the channel there. You'll see the premiere, which is due for this Wednesday. Again, as many people that could like and subscribe to that would be absolutely brilliant. Sort of share it with your Fulham mates as well, because I want to grow that. And obviously, the more interest it is, the more interested people will get to interview. And obviously, there is a few sort of dream people that I'd love to interview, and we want to get to that point. So, yeah, if anyone who's on Twitter, follow us on Twitter. Anyone who uses YouTube regularly, please have a look for us there.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm actually going to put you in the hot seat now because you had me in the hot seat for a good 45 minutes. So I'm going to ask you this. You've now interviewed Sammy James, myself, and Jack. So you've done your first 3 episodes. What has stood out from your first 3 episodes? What have you learned?
I think one of the things I've learned so far is, especially when I sort of think about my own personal experiences of being a Fulham fan, you learn very quickly that everybody comes to the club in different ways, and not everyone is sort of birthright a Fulham fan, taken from when they're a kid, and then it just becomes a natural progression of how to become a Fulham fan, which would be how I became a Fulham fan, sort of taken from a baby and sort of didn't really have a choice. So it's always interesting to sort of find out why people sort of come to Fulham and then stay at Fulham. And that's been some of the interesting things that I found out so far. It's also been very good to find out how people like yourself and like Jack, who run podcasts about Fulham, who are not based in the UK, and how easy it is to do that, and how easy it is to stay sort of in contact and feel like you're part of like the Fulham family, as we say. So that's been very interesting so far.
Well, what's interesting to me, and after you interviewed me, I was thinking about this, and I know that you already talked a little bit about this, Ash, before we talk about the foam stuff that we're going to talk about on this show. It really is a family, and I see it that way. It's been a family that has welcomed me, welcomed so many from around the world, and it can be local, it can also be global, and that's what's great about it. But what it really is, it's a family. And one of the things that actually, as a family, I don't think other supporters from other clubs don't get sometimes, because I hear about, and you probably have seen this, Ash, even recently, I had this supporter come at me a little bit about Fulham's supporters, and I will defend Fulham supporters. It's not about being the loudest. It's not about singing the best. It's not about all that. That's part of the experience. But it's truly, for me, what separates Fulham from these other supporters that support other clubs. It's truly as a family. I keep going back to that. We support each other, but we support Fulham Football Club. We're all in it together. And it's not just about being the loudest.
Yeah, no, that's very true. One of the things I would say that I've sort of found in the time that I've been trying to put this whole thing together is I've had an awful lot of support from the Fulham podcast community. Yourself, Sammy James, who has been absolutely detrimental in me starting this thing up. I can't even begin to thank him enough for the amount of input he's put in to help me. And then Jack, the guys at That's So Craven, I've been lucky enough. I've been on their podcast. I was on their podcast last Sunday. I've sort of started to do a little bit of work with them on this side as well, just to help out. It's been great. And it's very true that about the Fulham family thing. That has sort of proved it to me quite a lot as well. Because I am aware I've got friends who do podcasts for other football clubs, and there can be quite a lot of animosity between podcasts within the same football club, because people are sort of afraid that you're sort of stepping on people's toes. And I know what I'm doing is slightly different, so it shouldn't be the case. But I've definitely found that there's an awful lot of mutual support and respect from people within the podcast community, and I'm hoping that it'll be the same, obviously, when I get to speak to fans too.
Right. And I think you'll see that. And because obviously many reach out to me. And, and again, just we don't have many comments, but I'm just going to share this from Wayne Walden. We're one big family at the cottage. And that is really true, my friend. That really is true. And that to me speaks volumes. And again, I'm not trying to slight any other supporter of any other club. Ash, this is my club. This is your club. I just think we're special. I think we're a little bit different.
Yeah, and I get that, and I know that anyone who supports any other team will sit there and they'll say the same thing, that that they feel that they're a bit they feel special too. But I think it is different. There's a different atmosphere that atmosphere going to Fulham. Everyone's welcome. I've never really ever had any issues at Fulham from other Fulham fans, and there are many many people that I barely speak to, but will know each other by face through going to Fulham, and we'll see each other on a match day, sort of say hello, catch up sometimes. But that's how family works anyway, isn't it? So you're not always
Exactly.
necessarily the closest with everyone that you're around, but you always like to know that everyone's doing well and that everyone sort of supports each other, and that's what I found so far.
Okay, excellent. All right. Let's get into Cottage Talk now, talking about two situations that I want to get your thoughts on. One involves Paulina. You and I were messaging back and forth. And this is something I've talked a little bit already on Cottage Talk. How would Fulham be able to deal with the loss of João Palhinha? I think this is a very interesting two matches coming up. How are they going to be able to deal with two sides who want to have the ball, Ash? We're talking Brentford and we're talking Arsenal. How are they going to be able to deal with these midfields? I mean, they are two very good battles that they're going to be dealing with here with both clubs. So, how are they going to be able to do it? So, let's start here. Who do you think is going to play the Palhinha role? Because you could say it's going to be Harrison Reed. Could it be Lukic? Could it be someone that we're not expecting? Who do you think is going to play the Palhinha role? But let's start here. How concerned are you?
Quite. I'm quite concerned because Palhinha has proven so far this season that nobody else can sort of do what he does. He's not. You don't become the best tackler in the league off of no reason. You don't become one of the most committed midfielders without putting the legwork in. And it's been a long time since we've had someone in midfield who is capable to take charge like he is, and is capable to demand the center of the field like he is. So whoever does step in on Monday night is going to have massive, massive shoes to fill because they're going to have to not just play as well as they can. They're going to have to try and do some of the stuff that João does sort of naturally, and that's going to be very, very hard no matter who sort of has to step in. And when you think about Brentford and the way they play, I think that it's interesting you should say for Brentford and for Arsenal, we might have to look at these two games slightly differently because I
Okay.
think that they they both sort of have different attributes that we have to be very, very wary of. And I think that whoever has to come in to fit in for João is going to have to probably have two of the best games of their season to sort of make it look like he's not missing. So I am very, very concerned that he's not going to be playing, obviously.
Okay. And so am I. And here's the thing that I did, Ash. I went back and I watched the last match when Paulinho went off for just about 10 plus minutes to get an idea of what I think is going to happen. I don't know if this is exactly what's going to happen, but I have a feeling it's going to be Harrison Reed playing Paulina's role and Lukic playing the Reed role. So it's a very small sample. We're talking 10 minutes. And I saw some things in these 10 minutes and said, okay, I could see how this could work. But I could also see that it could be very different from what we're accustomed to. But your thoughts on let's just play the game and say Harrison Reed plays the role. Here is my issue with this. Now, say Harrison Reed plays the role. Has this defined role as someone that is basically a box to box midfielder that is basically just pestering the other team. So now you're kind of taking that away. You're taking that away to play the Palhinha role. Do you think that Harrison Reed will be the player to play the Palhinha role? And do you think if he does, that might hurt Fulham in another way in his old position?
Yes, yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think that Reed is going to sort of step up into Paulina's role, and then Lukic is going to have to play the Reed role. But I think that the biggest problem is, especially against Brentford on Monday, is that we're going to have to be very, very solid in the middle of the park. They're going to be attacking very high, and they're going to. So whoever is playing in that position is going to not only have to support whoever else is playing the sort of defensive role, is going to have to be an outlet for Pereira as well.
Right.
And whether or not Reed can do that, I it's not that I don't think he can, because I Harrison Reed has been nothing but great this season in playing his role, but he hasn't had to play that link up role as much because Palhinha has been doing it so well.
That's right.
Lukic sort of he just in the brief games I've seen him play at Fulham and sort of in Italy, he does play box to box quite well. He can play box to box, so they may well sort of use both of them sort of interchanging as the game goes along, sort of just trying to break up what could be a sort of quite a stubborn Brentford like midfield. So the honest answer is it's hard to say exactly how those two will play there like that. But I think that they have a good chance to sort of be quite interchangeable during the game. And I think it would be one that we might see that one of them will play a bit more advanced than the other. And I wouldn't be too shocked if after 10, 15 minutes they change over and they sort of keep doing that throughout the game to sort
Very
of keep the
interesting.
midfield fresh.
And that's actually I wouldn't be against that type of strategy, Ash, because I think that they also need to figure out how this is all going to play out. They're going to be doing this for 2 matches now. Like you said, they're different teams that they're playing against, different midfields. So they're going to have to figure this out, and they might have to do it, I hate to say it, on the fly. They're going to have to see what works and what doesn't work and how that they can, like you said, and also keep fresh because they're probably going to be working extremely hard. The one thing that I will say is that in the short period of time where I've seen Lukic, he obviously offers something different than Reed does in that position. Would you say that he is closer to, I wouldn't call him doing like that Kearney role, but he's closer to that than doing the Reed role?
Um, in the couple of games I've seen him play for us, especially, he does seem to play the Kenny role a little bit more. He's been sort of quite comfortable being on the ball and pushing up. He's been quite comfortable being that person who sort of plays slightly more advanced, and he is very good at sort of controlling the ball and being on the ball. So I wouldn't be too surprised if he starts in that position and then sort of Reed stays where he's naturally been. But I think that both of them are going to have to sort of be interchangeable as the game goes along. And I also think that there's a higher possibility that maybe Bobby Decordova-Reid might have to sort of play a bit more of a central role in this game as well if he plays. And I think that may well sort of be a team of three that sort of have to cover what Palhinha does in the sense of making sure that we're sort of covering all the bases on defense and in attack, because I see Monday's game being quite fluid and being quite sort of gung ho and being back and forth. Whereas I don't see the Arsenal game being that way. I see the Arsenal game being a bit more us defending and have to counter.
Right.
I don't think the Brentford game will be like that. I think the Brentford game is going to be a little bit more end to end, and so there's going to be an awful lot of box to box midfield needed naturally in order to get through the game. So as I say, I think that there might be a little bit of interchange between them. But I think Sasha will probably start in sort of Paulina's role
Okay.
because that's where when he has played, he's played a bit further up front, like as you say, like a Tom Kearney would.
Right.
Um, so I that's what I think will happen on Monday.
Okay. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I'm fascinated by it. I'm nervous by it. I do like what you said about Bobby Decordova-Reid. It's funny because you and I were just talking about on your show, cult heroes. I think Bobby Decordova-Reid someday might be one because of all the roles that he plays. Ash, what's interesting about him is that he's very valuable. I always gravitate to players that can do so many different things. Maybe not be excellent at any one thing, but can always help you when you need help. And that's Bobby Decordova-Reid. So maybe he might be very valuable in this match against Brentford.
We have to be honest. He's only not played in goal, hasn't he? Like he's played everywhere else. So I think I had this conversation with someone the other day on Twitter about they were saying that Bobby Decordova-Reid's like probably not one of the best players in the league, but I was trying to explain to them that he's probably not the best player in any of the positions he plays in. But name me another player that can play in 7 positions as comfortably as he can. He's a great utility player to have. And I see on Monday he may well be very, very much needed. I don't think he'll start. I'll be very, very surprised to see him start. But I wouldn't be surprised, especially if we get put under the cosh quite soon, that he will end up on at some point to sort of help sort of stem that centre of the park. Because I don't think anybody else who's on the bench
No,
will necessarily have the experience to be able to do that.
right. I'm going to share this comment from my friend Steve Reynolds. This is what he has to share, Ash. Reed will fill in as he's done all season. Need a bulldog to mix it up. It's a good point.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with Steve. Like we don't want to disrupt our own style that much anyway, because you don't want to go into a game as big as this Brentford game and then sort of messing around in the middle of the park, because it's the most important part of the pitch for us, especially going forward. One of the things that I was thinking about earlier on, we were talking about this, is actually if Mitrovic is fit to start, because
Yes.
that may well also have an impact on who plays in midfield, because we're going to want some players that can link up quite easily, especially if, as I sort of feel like the game's going to be, if it's going to be as back to front as it is, we're going to need to be able to be quite fluid in getting the ball from back to front. So that's what I personally think that it may well be needed. That's where Bobby may well have to come on, and Pereira's going to have to be on it as well. He's going to have probably not the games he's had the last couple of games he's played where he's not been in the mix. He's probably going to have to get really stuck in this game, and that is one of the biggest problems with losing a player like Palhinha. Is no matter what size of a club you are, losing a player like that is you need multiple players to cover the shift that he puts in.
That's right. You need multiple players. That's a good point, Ash. What's interesting, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because if Mitro starts, which I expect him to, and comes back and is integral in the build-up play, and they get the ball to him, I think that might relieve some of the pressure that we might be under.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that one of the things when you watch the game that Mitro's not played in is that Vinicius doesn't sort of
He can't do
give
it.
that link up play very
Yeah.
well. And that's not a slight on Vinny. He's just not Mitro, and no one's Mitro. So we have to be aware that everyone's going to have to be on it on Monday. Monday's going to be a very, very intense game. And I think that the way that Brentford play is quite intense, and we're going to have to be on it. And that's what I say. I think that the game's going to be very back and forth, and we're going to just have to make sure that whoever's in the middle of the park is controlling the middle of the park. And it's going to be on probably Marco Silva to be watching and making sure that Lukic and Reed are able to switch over if needed, because we don't want to have to make early subs or get completely destroyed in the center of the park.
Right. And what's interesting, and if you've listened or seen the comments from Marco in his presser or his interview on FFC TV, sounds like to me, Ash, reading between the lines, that he is fully confident that he can have a player that can do the job. Not to do exactly what Palhinha can do, but it's almost, and I'm used to this here with the teams I follow, it's next man up. You have to pick up the slack, and confident that they can do it. Not only that, he's not planning on changing how Fulham play. He has already said, I'm paraphrasing, Fulham is still going to do what Fulham do, Ash.
Well, let's be honest. We're where we are in the table for a reason. It's because we play football the way we play football.
Right.
Barring a few away games where we've had to change up our style of play, and namely that was because there was no Mitro, not because there was no one in the centre of the park. Um, I don't see us changing the way we plan on playing this game. And one of the things that it's funny you should say about next one up. If we want to move up levels, if we want to be that team that are pushing for Europe, who are able to play in Europe, we're going to have players that can step up when players are not playing. So
Exactly.
it's a great test. It's a great test for the squad on Monday. But I have full confidence that Sasha Lucic can cover that spot. But I don't expect anything less of Marco Silva to be completely confident in the team, because we've given him no reason to be. The players have given him no reason not to be confident. And I fully suspect whoever is going to play in that position on Monday, they're just going to be as wholehearted as João Palhinha is anyway, because we're going to have to be intense, and I don't see that being a problem for Harrison Reed,
Nope.
and I don't think it'll be a problem for Sasa Lucic, because I know he can tackle. You don't play as many games as he did in Italy. You don't play for the Serbian national team if
That's
you're
right.
afraid to tackle.
It's a
So
good point.
I back him to sort of cover that position. And as I say, if he can't for whatever reason, or someone gets a yellow card, I imagine that Bobby Decordova could come in and
Could come
cover
in.
a
Yep.
bit. maybe not at their standards, but could cover it.
And I'm glad that you brought this up, Ash. What's great about this, it's not ideal to have Palhinha out. Obviously, we don't want Palhinha out, but it also opens up an opportunity to see how far Fulham have come. Can they overcome this? And I think that's important. They could not overcome it when they played Newcastle United when he was out. They couldn't. They went with Chalba. Obviously, there are circumstances that go along with that. But here's another opportunity. Let's see the growth. This would be a huge test, 2 huge tests coming up. And it might actually, if they can pass the test, Ash, propel them farther than we could imagine. That's how big this is.
Yeah. I think that Lukic has to look at it as this is potential. He's sort of his test to see how well he's going to cope next year when he's probably going to have to play a bit more prominently than he is now.
Right.
For Harrison Reed, I imagine this is the test of proving that he is as good as we all think he really is. And Harrison Reed this season alone has stepped up massively. He stepped up massively because he probably wasn't seen as being able to cope in the league as well as he has done. But without Jow next to him, without a little bit of oomph next to him, we have sometimes struggled. And that Newcastle home game, okay, let's forget the fact that Chalobah was sent off so early and it sort of left us so light in midfield that they didn't have a chance. There's been other games where he's had to step up and he has done so far. And I said I'm quite confident going into Monday that we have enough.
Yep.
But it's still going to be a massive test because I'm also very, very much aware of how good Brentford are in midfield.
Yep.
And we just have to be wary of that. But I'm quite confident that they'll be okay.
I'm actually feeling, I wouldn't say very confident, but I'm feeling confident that they will be prepared and they'll be ready to go and that they'll have some answers. The question is, how many answers will they have and who will step up? And this is a wonderful opportunity for players to step up. So I'm glad that we're talking about that. Great stuff, Ash. All right. Coming up next to end the show, Ash and I are going to talk about the situation with Manor Solomon. Okay, Ash, to end the show, I know you've seen the speculation. I've seen it as well, and we're going to continue to see this. The situation with Manor Solomon. He is on loan, and I've heard different things. I think we've all heard different things, but it looks like it's just simply a loan. So what's going to happen after the season? Will Fulham sign him permanently? Because there's no question that there are going to be big clubs coming in for him. So let's just get to it, my friend. How concerned are you with Fulham signing Manor Solomon permanently?
I am extremely concerned about Fulham signing Manor Solomon permanently. I know we've only seen him play less than 90 minutes of football in the Premier League, but he looks like he's an absolute level above some of the other things we have going on at the club. And again, it's going back to if we want to move up a level, we want to go up to the next stage as a football club. We need players like Manor Solomon.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, none of us really know the reasons why we didn't sign him for €7 million or £7 million when that deal was on the table with Shakhtar earlier on in the season. I've heard loads of conflicting stories about they originally the deal was agreed and then it was sort of because of the outbreak of the war it was unagreed. I've also heard that Fulham were trying to be a bit sly and get it for free, and we're hoping that we could sort of mess around that way. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's an awful lot of stuff behind the scenes that we're completely unaware of. I think there was a lot of grey in the way that deals were going on, especially with players coming out of Ukraine because of this new, the UEFA rule about players being able to sign away from the country, but not sort of stopping their contracts, but sort of pausing them. It is also slightly weird that Manor's contract was all the way going up to December. Very
Yep.
rarely players' contracts go to December. They tend to always go to sort of July. So that was also a bit odd. And I think that the biggest problem is that we can't really act on it. I know there's a lot of people that sort of want us to be working on a contract with Shakhtar now. that's all we can do. All we can do now is talk to Shakhtar. We can't have any contact directly with Manor about signing until the end of the season, because if we do have too many talks about contracts now, we're potentially breaking rules with the Bosman rules. So we have to be very, very careful about trying to talk our way around signing him. I think so. The only way we can deal now is sort of talk with Shakhtar and hope that we can come up with some deal before somebody else gets in and tries to sign him. The only thing we can do as a football club is make sure that Manor feels as wanted and as loved as he already has been made to feel by lots and lots of Fulham fans, and hope that he sort of falls in love with the club enough that he wants to stay, and no matter what, that's his next step. But I think an awful lot will depend on where we finish this season and how seriously we take trying to get him in. So we have to see.
It's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. But I agree with you, Ash. I think one big part of this is going to be how Fulham finish the season, because I think a player of his ability is going to want to play in Europe. So I think we're going to have to get into Europe to convince him to sign with Fulham. And so I think that also puts a lot of pressure on the club, but I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing, but I agree with you. The thing about it that irritates me is that there's so much talk. We don't know exactly how this all broke down, but I'm just hoping that they can get a deal done, because this is the type of player you need. This is the type of player you need, as you said, to take you to the next level. He's already with you, but it sounds like you're going to have to convince him to stay. I think Fulham can show him the money. I don't think showing him the money is going to be the biggest problem. I think it's going to be the convincing to stay and say, hey, listen, we got a project here. Be a huge part of this. And that's what they're going to have to sell him on. Because when you got clubs like Arsenal and Tottenham that are probably going to be after him, you're going to have to sell him on other things, that you're going to have an opportunity to play each and every week. You're going to be a focal point along with Mitro each and every week. We're going to be depending on you each and every week. We're going to make you a big part of what we do. Maybe that will do it. But I think European football is probably going to have to be a part of it, Ash.
Yeah, well, I think we're quite fortunate that this summer, one thing that we all need to remember, this summer we have an awful lot of FFP that's written off.
Yeah.
So we will have money to spend this summer. So I don't think financially the deal is going to be that much of an issue. The problem is going to be trying to get him to actually come in. One of the biggest things that we've had is as I said, and as you just agreed with it, we don't know. No one really knows the nitty gritty of this deal and how it was set up, because there we don't know. A lot of people are sort of blaming the club for not getting a buy-on clause, not sort of putting in agreements. But I don't think under the rules of the way that UEFA put this deals about that we could do any of that. I think literally all we could do was sign him the way we signed him,
right,
and hope that we can then get him on a permanent. I think that we're going to have to sell him the project, and that he's going to have to be given some guarantees that he's going to be sort of pushed in certain ways. I think that players like Manor Solomon are very marketable as a club. So I think the club need to use that. I think the club are going to have to sell him in the sense that, we're going to push you as an entity, not just as a player. And we're going to have to hope that that's enough to keep him.
Yeah.
But I do honestly think if anyone is going to come in and have to sort of pull the rug under our feet, they're probably going to have to come in with a lot of money to do that. Which is the only scary thing for me, is that I say we have money to spend during the summer.
Right.
It's whether or not, we don't have someone who has ridiculous financial clout come in and go,
well, that's true.
Here's a wad of money, and we can't keep up with that.
Well, that's crazy money. And Fulham, I think, will show him the money. But like you said, is someone going to blow him away? And that's a possibility. Yeah. Because if you see the ability that we've seen in such a short period of time, they're thinking that this could be the type of player that, I saw today, a gentleman in Israel thinks that he's a 100 million pound player. I don't know. I don't know if he's on that level, but he certainly is a very valuable player, and I think will be for years to come. I think he's only scratched the surface, Ash. I've saw the comparisons to not just, Eden Hazard, but also Robin too. Being that type of player. And you're talking players on an extremely high level. That's what I think we have here. So it's going to be something we're going to have to follow. I don't know how much can be done right now, but they should be doing whatever they can to convince him. And like you said, make sure he knows that we're going to do whatever we can with this project, and he would be a vital part of the project. That's the way I'm looking at it. All right. Ash, I've kept you longer than I said. Let's wrap this up. Any final thoughts before we go?
About Manor, about everything, really. I think when we look at the game on Monday, I think we have to look at it slightly differently to how we look at the Arsenal game. As I say, they're going to be completely different games. I think that all we can do is sort of get behind whoever is playing and then sort of push to hope that they can step up to it. With Manor, I think we all just have to be on a bit of a wing on a prayer, light a few candles, and everyone pray that he sort of stays. But we'll see.
Okay, great stuff. Fantastic stuff. All right, Ash, before we go, one last time, please tell everyone about your show, which is going to be debuting on YouTube on Wednesday.
Yeah, so as I said earlier on in the pod, that FFC and Me starts on YouTube. 8 a.m. is the premiere of the first episode, which was recorded with Sammy James from the Fulhamish podcast. We just look into what it's like to be a Fulham fan, how people became Fulham fans, why they stay Fulham fans, and we're hoping to, as I say, speak to as many people around the world. So anyone who is listening to this who is a Fulham fan, maybe not from the UK, but I also want UK-based fans to get involved. So follow us on Twitter at FFC and Me. Send me a DM because I want to try and sort of get as many people interviewed as possible, because the hope for this is we'll have a new episode out every week.
That's great.
So I need more and more people to fulfill that to keep going forward. So thanks very much for your time, Russ, and thank you very much for coming on the show to be interviewed as well.
You are welcome. And if you're interested, please do contact Ash at FFC and Me on Twitter. Get involved, because it was such a joy doing it with you. I enjoyed talking about my experience, and I have a feeling everyone that does it with you will feel the same way. So please do get in touch with Ash. All right. Great stuff. Well, it is time to wrap up this show of Cottage Talk. For my very special guest, Ash from FFC and Me, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, now part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.